trying this again. If you're just tuning in, hopefully this is working. If not, I will see what's going on. So bear with me. We'll figure this out. Alright, so I'm just checking to see if it's actually going live or what we have going on right now. Alright, it looks like I am live. So hopefully when you guys get here, this will work. Alright, I've got chat going. I do have a little bit of feedback because of circumstances. So I'm sorry, this is a little awkward, but we're gonna figure it out. Okay. Okay, so if this is delayed, I apologize. Also, if you're on here and you're wondering why I started early, I'm starting early just to make sure that this is actually going to work, because last time it was a whole mess, it was a whole thing, and hopefully this will work, because then I get to use this camera right here, and that's going to be important because otherwise my computer's webcam, it just isn't going to give me the ability to show you my surface area. So hopefully we will get going. If you come into this, of course, say hi. I'm going to also put that in our chat. Okay, so I decided I'm going to start from scratch from what we did on, excuse me, I just poked myself in the eye. On Wednesday, I saw that 3 people looked at it. I just went ahead and deleted it because it was just a whole problem. But let's go ahead and look at what we're going to do today. I'm going to make a basic 4x8 wall. Then I'm going to make a 5-foot door wall. And then I'm going to make an 8-foot window wall. And hopefully from those things you'll be able to get a pretty good idea about how to apply that to your space, which of course will be different. So the first things we've got to do is we've got to measure all this out. I'm going to use this this pen because I want to make sure that you guys can actually see what's going on the page. I would highly recommend using pencil so that you have the ability to erase. Also, I'm not going to use this straight edge because at some point it got warped and is therefore useless. Let me grab another one. This will work. Alright, so please make note that, I'm going to bring this closer to you. On my ruler, the beginning of the measurement is here. That might be the case for you as well, so don't bring your ruler's edge to the edge of your paper if you want to maintain that edge, and I do. I always find that it's easiest if you've got a if you have a straight edge already existing, why cut in and get rid of that edge? It's just more work for you. So anyway, I'm going to measure out my 4-foot width. So let me do that real quick. And I'm going to go ahead and do that at the bottom of the page, which would make more sense, because then I've got another straight edge. because I'm not worried about reusing this paper, I'm going to do that at the top too, so that I know that I've got it nice and lined up, which is really important to me. It will make everything easier later on when I'm trying to draw this straight. So now I've got 2 points that I can match, but just to be safe, because I want to make sure that I draw this straight, I'm going to do another mark from the inside of the page. Okay, and then once I have all 3 marks lined up, we will go ahead and draw that line. Okay, now we know that this needs to be 10 feet, or excuse me, 8 feet. So I'm going to put a mark at 8 feet. And I'm going to mark that on the opposite side as well. Alright, so now I should have a clear path of where to cut. This is going to be the 4x8 sheet good that I will apply to my flat. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mark it as 4x8. Flip that so you guys can see, 4x8. So I know that that's what it is. I don't need to remeasure it. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut it out. I realized that a couple of the things I was doing were a little bit harder with an X-Acto blade. An X-Acto blade will help you do a lot of awesome things, but it will not necessarily be as easy as everything else. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut it with a scissors. It's just going to be a lot faster for this part of it, and it will just make life easier. Now, if you don't have a scissors, of course, you can definitely use your X-Acto blade that I sent you. But I'm guessing that most of you have at least some kind of scissors lying around the house. If they're super dull, you will probably find that the X-Acto blade is easier, but I happen to have a nice new pair of scissors that I got recently, so I was like, well, that's just easier. I'm gonna then use this piece to make our corner blocks, and if you're not remembering what a corner block is, go to chapter 6 and take a look at what those pictures look like. And the corner blocks are the pieces that we put in the corner to assist with the joining process of our frame. So I'm going to make those first today. You would normally be a little bit more specific in calculating with what size of your corner block you would use. But for this, I'm just going to make them 1 inch. That's a little bit big proportionally, but I think it'll make it easier to replicate how these corner blocks function in building our frame. Also, normally, you would probably make them out of a thicker material. Yes and no. A lot of times you would make it from a different material than what your sheet good is. But for the sake of our project, I think that this will work just fine. So then I'm going to, oops, got an email. Let me make sure that's not one of you having trouble. No? New comment. Oh, that's nice. Okay. Sorry if you're coming into that and you're like, why is she talking into nothing? That's just that's just me making sure it's not one of you guys coming in and not being able to get logged on. We're not scheduled to meet for another 2 minutes, so I wouldn't be surprised if any of you are here yet. But just as a reminder, say hi when you get here so I know that you're here. Also, let me know if the audio is weird. I'm hoping that there are no issues, but it's really hard for me to tell how things are going on my end. All right, so I'm going to continue working on these corner blocks. So I'm just going to mark 1 inch, and we're going to essentially make squares, and then we will divide those squares into triangles, and that will give us our corner blocks. I'm making more than I need for the first flat, and I'll just have extra left over so that we can speed through this part when we get to the door wall, the window wall, and so on. Go. And then, whoops, I'm going to essentially go down the center of, actually let me bring it closer so you guys can see a little bit better. So you're going to do a diagonal, the center of your square, and that will become, oops, the light's kind of making that hard to see, there you go. That will become your corner block, okay? Now, a trick of the trade, if you guys aren't already familiar with this, with regards to doing anything that you want to be a certain level of exact, is don't put your ruler directly on the 2 points you want to meet. You want to put it slightly behind so that your pen or pencil's mark is actually landing directly on those points instead. So I'm going to do one. So these are the ones where that has gone correctly. And where I put my ruler when I drew that, let me get there, kind of hard to see, I'm sorry. There we go. So just behind it. Now I'm going to do one that's wrong, where I put my ruler on the exact 2 points where I want it to meet. And then you can see this one is on point right here. But then if I go over to this one, I wish I could zoom in a little bit better, I'm sorry. But there's a little bit of a gap there, and that will make this one smaller than this one. Oops, sorry. That will make this one smaller than this one. So in an effort to make things as even as possible, take into consideration how your pen will hit the edge of your ruler and how much thickness that will add on to what you're drawing. Hi, Caleb. You might have to backtrack eventually a little bit to get caught up with where we're at, because I just wanted to get going and make sure this was all working. But I think we've got things going. Let me know if audio is not doing what it's supposed to. It sounds weird on my end, but if it's working on your end, awesome. Alright, so then we're just going to go ahead and cut our corner blocks with some real quick cuts. just fix this one. Alright, so just to make sure it's clear as we're working on these, I'm going to label these all CB, corner block. You do not need to do this while you're working on your projects, but I just want it to be easy as we go along to know which pieces are which. Hoping. Alright, so then let's take the remainder of our paper and we're going to make, wow, my brain disappearing right in front of me. Oops. Okay. Okay, let me see if this helps. I think I made a change that will fix. So let me know if that echo is still there as we keep going. Hopefully it won't be. So I'm going to go ahead and make our toggles. Not our toggles. Oh, why can't I think of the right name? Shoot. My brain has completely left me. I'm so sorry, guys. Oh, it's right on the tip of my tongue. I always do this with toggles too, or with the I'm really frustrated right now that I can't think of it. I literally always do this with when I'm talking about these. I always want to call them toggles. Not corner blocks. I would have to get out my book to remember, but I'm just having one of those days where my brain is just all over the place, so I apologize. But we're gonna create the pieces that join together your diagonal bracing on and your support in the center of your flat. For some reason my brain can't think of that, so if one of you knows what I'm talking about, just say it. Hi Darby. I'm just feeling very scatterbrained at the moment. I'm so sorry, but we're going to make those pieces and we're going to make them the same thickness as the material that we're going to be making our frame out of. So I'm just going to take this piece and I am going to get a quick line drawn, or a couple of them, and we'll cut those and then we'll cut them down to the correct size. This will just make quick work of it, and then we'll know that they're going to be the right thickness. Of course, make sure that you're lining it up every single time or you're not going to get a straight line, and you'll have variance and you'll be like, ah, this isn't the same size. So help yourself out that way. Also, let me know if there's still an echo or if you can't hear me or if that's a issue at all. In order to make it so that there wasn't an echo, I had to make it so I couldn't hear myself. So if you can't hear me, let me know. Just, well, I suppose if you can't hear me, asking you to let me know. Yay, the echo's gone. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to cut these out. Actually, I should make shorter work of this by measuring these all out to the correct size. Make sure you've got the right side of your ruler up. So these we're going to basically cut in half, so they'll each be the equivalent of 1 foot. Now normally we wouldn't need them to be that long. On average they're closer to something like 6 inches, but this will make it easier and clearer, and because we're essentially using paper to help support with this, it'll just make it a little bit stronger. So we'll get our quick line made in there. And we'll cut these pieces. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna keep those pieces in a pile over here. We'll come back to those. Then we're going to go ahead and start making our framing. So, I'm gonna quick check what's going on in the chat here. Yeah. I'm sorry. It is the room. It's kind of like a big old echo box, so I apologize. Okay, so these popsicle sticks, move those out of the way, are just over 4 inches, which would be 4 feet for us. So I personally don't like having the little rounded ends. It's just something that aesthetically bothers me. If you have the rounded ends in your project, there will be no points off for it. But I'm going to clip them off, but I'm going to make sure that I'm cutting them off at a point where I will still have 4 feet, so I don't have to use multiple popsicle sticks on the width of my flat. So I'm going to mark where I can cut them off. You can do this a couple of different ways. If you have a strong enough scissors, you can just make quick work of it. I especially recommend that for the ends because you don't have as much to work with, and so it can be kind of hard to break those off. But you can, of course, use your X-Acto blade and just score over and over again until it gets weak enough. It takes about 30 seconds more than what I just did, so it's not a big time saver, but and then you just essentially bust that piece off. It's a lot easier if you're like cutting in the middle of a stick or something because there's enough tension to go. Well, here, I'll show you one I'm not using. If I'm scoring in the center of this one, and I'm just going to repeatedly run my X-Acto blade over the exact same spot. So I hope it doesn't want to focus too much, but I think you can see that there's a slight difference in sheen in the center there. Now, right along that line, which is right here, I can just go and it will want to break. Now, the one downside is if you go towards the line that you've scored, so when I wanted to break this way, I started pulling apart this bit in the back. If you break the other way first, you will have less of this sort of tear off. I wish it would focus a bit better, but so either way is a decent option. If you have a good scissors, use it if you want it. But I've got my 4-foot piece, and actually that's it's good to go ahead and keep that, and I'm going to set that aside because then I've got a quick marking stick to do the 4 feet. So I'm not going to actually use this one in construction. I'm just going to keep this on hand so that the next time I don't have to get out my ruler. I can literally just go up to my popsicle stick and mark it off. I'm going to do another one that will actually be the width of our flat, because remember we need to take off a little bit to conform to how much this the width is going to line up, because we're going to want the longest piece, our 8-foot section, to be the part that be the part that's longest and not have as much cut off. So I'm going to mark on this stick from the very edge. Normally we would just measure how much that's going to be, but I think it will be easier to just take into consideration the actual width of the popsicle stick. I apologize, I got that out of viewing range. So I'm going to find the exact edge and I'm going to mark it on both sides, and that will be our total width for our top and bottom of our flat. If at any point something I'm saying isn't quite making sense, please comment and I will stop what I'm doing and we'll get you guys caught up. So I'm going to go ahead and get that marked off. Okay. Do that on both sides. Whoops. Okay. And that will be probably pretty close to what we cut off anyway, but it would make the measurement of what that would be, I'm going to clarify that line a little bit, would be 3 feet. Let me show you actually. So with what I've marked off as what we need to cut off would put us at just over 3.5 feet. Can you guys see that there? So that is going to be the actual width of our 4-foot flat. And that's something you'll have to take into consideration with each flat. So for example, if I do an 8-foot by 8-foot flat, both are equal in length. So I can pick either one to be the skinnier section, but I need to keep that in mind. What I usually do is I just say all the horizontal ones will be the pieces of the framing that need to be taken in, and the verticals will be the pieces of the framing that will remain consistent with 8 feet. That's just what works for me in my brain. I don't really care either way, but you will need to account for that when you're building your frame, or you will build something that's bigger than what you intended. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this guy. I will say the downside to using your scissors is that it can be a little rough on your hands if you're that person. So I'm going to name this stick horizontal. Oh, good job. Left the L off because I'm brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to grab my popsicle sticks here, and I need to make a total of 4 pieces that are 4 feet, so that I have my 8-foot verticals, and I need to make 2 pieces that are horizontal pieces, because they will be obviously the horizontal pieces. So doing this little shortcut of getting it done right away means that you don't have to worry about that ruler, and it'll just make it easier, I think. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now do keep in mind, you're in the same way that lumber has the ability to get warped, so do your popsicle sticks. So if you come across one that looks kind of, for lack of a better term, jankety, maybe just don't use that one. Also, I still have a good selection of popsicle sticks left, so if you need me to mail you some out, let me know. I think I gave you plenty, but it was hard to tell. So then what I like to do is I will label all my horizontal pieces with an H, and I will label all my vertical pieces with a V, and that way there will be no confusion, and I don't have to measure them to make sure that I've got the right thing. let's go ahead and do our vertical pieces. Yeah, Jinkity is something I learned a while back, and it's become an unfortunately prevalent part of my vocabulary. Have any of you guys started working on your final projects? It's okay if the answer is no. I'm not asking to like scold you. I'm asking you just to see how you guys are doing. I'm hoping that if we're working on them together in these live feeds and other things, that you'll have ample time to prep and get everything the way you need it. But of course, if you need some individual time, by all means, feel free to contact me and we will set that up. Awesome. I'm glad you guys are going to start working on it. I don't think that these will take terribly long. I mean, it depends on your space, of course. If you have tons of walls, then it will be different. But if you have not that much, it probably won't be that big a deal. So today we're going to work on the walls, and then on Wednesday I will do another live feed about the platform. So that's what you'll want to make your floor out of. And those are a little bit more challenging in some ways and also super easy in comparison in others. So, but the nice thing about your platforms is there will be less variation in what you need to make. You'll probably, depending on the size of your space, be able to just make a ton of 4x8 platforms, and you can just make standard. So in the same way that I was just like, okay, all the corner blocks are going to be this size, so I'm just going to make a ton of them. You can do that same thing in the same way that I'm making. Essentially, we are doing exactly what you would do in the shop. You would have a cut list, you would go and cut it, and you would make all the cuts you need to make, so you've got all the supplies that you need right there. So in terms of process, we're doing exactly what we would do in the shop. We're just doing it with very different tools. But you'll be able to do that a lot easier with platforms because a lot of them will have to be standard. They'll, in order to make it easy for you. And by that, what I mean is not to say that, like, if you've got a variety of sizes, it's harder. But think of it like making a puzzle. If all the puzzle pieces are the same size and shape and you're just putting squares next to each other, it's not nearly as hard as if you're trying to play Tetris with a bunch of weird pieces. So that's what we'll be doing on Wednesday. So I'm going to put these aside because I'm definitely going to use them again. But we're going to go ahead and make the frame for our first flat here. All right, so my verticals have to come together. And that's where having a bunch of these pieces is going to come in handy. Now, normally what we would do is we would put some glue on the two connecting ends. Well, actually, normally what we would do is we would have sticks of lumber that are probably long enough that we wouldn't have to join them on the vertical because that adds more strain. So normally you would just have a 8-foot long 1x4. But given our supplies and what we can work with, we would glue these two pieces together. And then we would take our, oh my gosh, I'm so mad at myself for not being able to think of what this is called. It's the easiest thing in the world, and I can't. Yeah, it's still not there. Anyway, we would take this piece and we would add glue to it, and we would put this on there, and then we would staple it together, or we would use screws, some kind of fastener. Some would even use like a nail gun, depending on the circumstance of what you're trying to build. But we aren't going to do that for a lot of obvious reasons. So what this will entail, in order for us to make these effectively, we will be using a very similar process, but we're going to have to let them dry before we can move on to putting them all together. So we're going to put all of our vertical pieces together and go from there. So if you guys haven't opened up your glue yet, a couple things you'll want to keep in mind. Tacky glue is really awesome. One of the nice things about it is it tends to stay wet a little bit longer, so you have a little bit of time to work with it. But when you go to open it up, the cap is, you can't really tell from here, but you would be able to tell if you look at your own bottle. The cap is closed, so you have a couple of different options. The way that this is designed, see if you can kind of see that stacked, maybe with my fingernail you can see how it's got these different levels in there. When you cut them off, when you go to open the bottle, that's how you will use it. You could be really conservative about it and just poke a hole in it with your X-Acto blade. You aren't going to get a lot out that way, but you could do that. Or you can just cut off this front end, which is what I'm going to do. And then you've got, let me see, maybe if I like shade it a little bit. No, it won't focus, I apologize. Well, you'll have an opening. Maybe if I show you this way. You can kind of see it, but anyway, you'll have an opening through which the glue can come out. Now, here's an example of, I have a big bottle because I use tacky glue so much. I was doing a project where I wanted the tip to be really tight, and so I just have, I left that end on, and of course the glue has like coated over it. So if I wanted to use it, I could always go down a level and cut that off. And so if at any point your distribution tip had Keystone, thank you. Oh my gosh, I'm so stupid. I'm so sorry. I'm just like sitting here going, I know this. Yes, they are called Keystones. Thank you, Caleb. Anyway, point being, you can always cut down the next level on your distribution tip and more will come out. But obviously the more you do that, the less control you will have, so keep that in mind. Anyway, so we're going to grab our glue here. And we're going to put our glue on both ends. Most adhesives, not all, I'd say damn near all, like themselves better than anything else. So gaff tape likes itself, hot glue likes itself. They just want to bond with each other. So by having that glue on both ends, help create a stronger bond. Now here's where the fun part's going to come in. And this is part of why I recommend that you have some kind of surface underneath. Obviously, if you can't tell by the paint all over, I specifically bought this table with the intention of getting mess all over it because I knew that I had a ton of projects to work on that would need that. If you don't have that, which I'm guessing you probably don't, especially if you're renting, what you want to do is get some kind of harder surface so that if you cut through it or you cut on it, you won't cut through it. I really recommend like cereal boxes are great. Some other boxes are okay, but like for example, if the box feels thin and it doesn't have that plastic coating on it that makes it a little bit tougher, don't use it because you will cut through it very easily. Also, if you just have a cardboard box that you can break down, that will work just as well. So use what you have. Also, if all else fails, if any of you bought the 11 by 14 sketchbook that I recommended, that the cover of that works really well. I've never cut through it before, and I've frequently used it as my cutting surface. So probably can't see it very well, but already that glue is starting to dry, which is good because it'll make it a lot tackier. I've put glue on the back of our keystone, thank you Caleb, and I'm going to go ahead and put that fairly center on there. And then I'm going to leave it alone to dry because otherwise it will not stick together. You got to give it a little bit of breathe time. So I'm going to move that out of my way and I'm going to do the next one. I'm just going to grab a different piece of paper. Where did I put my pieces? Okay, so I'll grab our other two vertical pieces, do the same thing. Also, part of the reason I'm doing it on these pieces of paper is because if worst case scenario, the glue overflows onto that piece of paper, I can always cut that paper and that will be it. Versus if it glues to my surface that I'm working on, then I've got a bigger problem to deal with. So I would also put some kind of barrier down. It can be a scrap of paper, just something so that you won't have to deal with that mess. So we'll grab another keystone here and get a decent amount of glue on. And we'll get it pretty close to center. I like to push it back and forth because more often than not, when I'm working with glue, I don't have how would I say this? Subconsciously, I don't put too much glue around the edges because I don't want to get it on my fingers. So by doing that, I get it closer to the edges, if not on the edge, which of course you want because you want it to stay down flat. So I'm going to move this piece out of the way. And we are going to start cutting the pieces for the 5 foot, for the 5 foot door flat because those need to stay before we can move on to the next step. So this is where it's going to get a little bit tedious. So if you want to start working on your own, I would definitely recommend it because basically, I'm just going to be doing a repeat of what I've already done, which is getting these popsicle sticks measured out for our next wall. Also, if you have any questions, now would be a good time since I'm not showing you anything new. Of course, there are going to be variations in what I'm doing. Some people have different preferences. And depending on what you eventually need your flat to do, you will need to make different adjustments. So for example, if I'm making a Broadway flat where it's covered in muslin, I would need to be very cautious of whatever surface is going to be the surface that's touching the muslin. I'd want to make sure that that surface is sanded. I would want to make sure that it's smooth and pretty. And of course I can do that before I get to the point where I'm putting the muslin on. I don't need to do that in the process of building it. But let's say I have, I don't really have a, oh, this will work. Okay, so see how this popsicle stick on the end here has this deformity. that's not just like some marker that I got on it. That came with it that way. And it does have a little bit of a divot there. If that was something that you were building with on a Broadway flat where you're going to get it covered with muslin, you would want to make sure that if you're going to use that, that was on the reverse side of what was going to get the muslin surface on the top of it, because otherwise that imperfection is going to come through when you're stretching the muslin. Now, unfortunately, I'm not going to have the ability to show you guys how that works because I don't have any fabric that would work properly for it. But there are definitely videos that I can point you in the right direction to, where other people have demonstration videos of how to stretch muslin on a flat. And so I will put a link to those below in this once this live feed's done, and you guys can take a look at those. Oh, well, we can't use that one. See what I mean? Not all of these popsicle sticks are winners. So, all right, you go over there. But yeah, Broadway flats are different. Currently, the method that we are using to build is what's typically used for Broadway flat. A Hollywood flat, the best way to think about it is it's a very hollow material. So everything would be put on edge like this, and there's an example of this in your book if you look at chapter 6. They are excuse me, my brain just left me for a second. There is an example in chapter 6 of your stagecraft handbook of a Hollywood flat versus a Broadway flat. And the reason things are put on edge is that the Hollywood flat it works better for sets that are supposed to sound and function like an actual real building. So if your actor is going to slam the door, if you have just these soft Broadway flats, it just won't. It won't. And they're just more structured. They also can support heavier levels of painter's texture on there. For example, if I'm going to put joint compound and glue and a ton of stuff, can I maybe put that on a Broadway flat? Maybe, but not probably a soft flat, which is what you would call a muslin flat. Also, it's more difficult to do things like have a picture hanging. To sum it all up, basically, a Broadway flat is really great for flats that you want to fly in and out and are lightweight, easy to move, and don't really need to function as walls for your actors to interact with. Excuse me, if I just called that a Hollywood flat, I apologize. I meant a Broadway flat. A Hollywood flat is a hard surface that actors can interact with, closer to what an actual physical wall would feel like. So, okay, so unlike our 4-foot wall, we're not going to be able to get 5 feet out of these popsicle sticks. So I need to measure a different look here. I can do one of them is going to pretty easily be that 4-foot. So I can just quick do that for one, and I'll need to do that twice. And then the other one will have to be an additional foot. And we'll just have to join them with our keystones. So, also, the thing to keep in mind is I'm making like kind of a general standard door flat in that you have an additional foot on one side of the door flat and approximately you'd have additional foot on either side, but that's not the only way to do a door flat, and it really depends on how your space works. So don't feel like you have to do this method when you're or this exact layout when you're doing a door flat. If it would make the build of your space easier to do it a little bit differently, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so I have my two longer pieces, and then I should be able to cut this 1 foot piece out of this piece of the popsicle stick. Okay, just making sure everything's still working. I tell you what, I had the most ridiculous time on Wednesday trying to film, so I apologize if any of you saw that. It was not good. So I'm just a little nervous that I will run into that issue today again. Okay, so I have my two 1 foot pieces that we are going to add on, and our our keystones will be a bit basically the same length as these, but that'll be okay. We're not going for perfection in terms of matching how things would work in the real world, because we're working with very different material. But we are trying to emulate that process. So, oh no, don't break. Well, that one didn't work. We will cut another one. So while I do this very repetitive process, one thing I wanted to ask you guys, computer keeps going ding, is I wanted to ask if you would be willing to send me some pictures that you've taken throughout the year. I would like to be able to do a little senior send-off for those of you who are graduating, since we won't be able to give you the traditional graduation. If you want to send those to my school email, I will work on putting together something for you. I have also asked Fred if he would be willing to put some kind of message out on Facebook too. So if you see that, it's just same message, it's just me. Okay. Now, the one thing to keep in mind, well, not the one thing, but one of the things you want to keep in mind, and this is true of real life construction and with this, the more glue you have, the more it's going to want to move around while you're working with it. So while I'm not suggesting you should not glue, excuse me, that you should not use a lot of glue, be intentional with it. If you've got a ton of overflow, you might have too much glue, because it will make it harder for you to keep things straight, because they will shift just like that is. I put a little too much glue on there. So we'll get these pieces glued together. know I've said this a few times, but this is not the traditional method of building models. So don't feel like if you're doing a set design sometime in the future, this is a process you have to go through. No one expects to be able to expects you to create the exact framing that you want in your model. Excuse me. Man, my brain all over the place today. But I mean, it's not as if anyone would be like, "What? How dare you? Why would you do that?" It's just more of, "Why would you work that hard?" But for this, you know, we're trying to emulate construction as much as possible. Okay. So, our tacky glue is taking a little bit of time to dry. So, I can do this one of two ways. I can keep going and keep doing this very repetitive thing while you guys watch, or we can pick this up again on Wednesday. It's up to you. There's only 4 of you watching right now, so you 4 get to decide. But yeah, these ones that I glued approximately 10 minutes ago, they're still drying. That is one of the positives / negatives with tacky glue. Sometimes it can take stupid long to dry, but because you have more time with it to work with it, it's not the same thing that you would have, say, with hot glue, where you get maybe 30 seconds to a minute at the most if you're using high temp hot glue. With tacky glue, you get a lot more time to work with it. So these are not ready for us to move on, but I can definitely keep working. I accidentally took my 4-foot piece. Okay. I was like, why do I have an extra horizontal? Alright, well, this is our new model piece. Okay. You're down to pick it up on Wednesday? Okay. If you guys are feeling like that's going to be best, I mean, it's already close to an hour, and I'm kind of going through the same repetitive process. What we would pick up on Wednesday then would be putting in our corner blocks. We would then also be creating our diagonal braces. So we're just gonna make a makeshift frame real quick before I end it. Oh, and my battery's dying low, so everything's culminating in this minute right now. Okay, so let's say this is our wall framing. We are also going to need some diagonal braces. We're going to make it not as wide so that I can use that, where we will also use our, well, you would cut them to be able to sit flush there, and we would also use our keystones there. And then in our meeting points, I'll just use these pieces and move those out of the way. In our corners, guess what? This is gonna blow your minds, guys. We're gonna use our corner blocks. So I can pick that up on Wednesday. If you guys are comfortable with that, and then that way this will have time to dry, and you will still have some time to get caught up. And if you want to work on the weekend on getting the correct pieces for your space, we can pick that up from there. And that way, while our flats are drying, we can start creating the framework for our platforms. So, okay, I'm gonna hang out for another minute or so in case anybody's got any questions or comments that they want to leave on the live chat, but otherwise I will see you guys on Wednesday. And of course, shoot me an email if you have any questions. If you're working on it and you're like, I just don't get this, why is this way? Definitely we can work on that. So, all right. I'm not seeing any questions or comments, so before my computer dies, I'm gonna go ahead and end this. You guys have a good weekend. Bye.